So, this morning, we're finishing up our series we've called Weird Things Jesus Said. And I know we've got some people who haven't been here for any part of the series, so I'm just going to have to say this again, that we called it that because while Jesus said a lot of fantastic, wonderful, beautiful things, he also said some really quite weird things, strange things, things that the people at the time thought, what's going on? What did he mean? And things that we can still think, what did he mean by that? So we've been looking at some of those. And today's weird statement might just be the strangest one of all. I feel like I've said that a few times, and then the next one seems weirder. But this may just take the cake, so to speak. Reminds me, actually, Michael Russell told me we should have a cake because Joe Hayes is back. But I didn't get a cake, Michael. Sorry. Sorry. Poor effort. Matthew 17, verse 20, Jesus says this, "Truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." Now, mustard seeds are really small, and mountains are really big. Okay? And Jesus says to his disciples, if they have just a little itty bit of faith, they can speak to a mountain and it will move. Now, I know we're all most of the people I know who are here are Bible-believing Christians, so I just want to show up hands up who's ever tried or done this. Any success? Moved a mountain. Be kind of handy, wouldn't it, if you could do that? I know Ruben likes bushwalking, you're a bit tired, day 3, there's a big mountain, you go, hang on fellas, leave it to me, we'll just put that over here for there, and we'll just walk through on the flat. Be kind of good, wouldn't it? It would be good. The question that kind of comes to my mind is faith. Oh, I wasn't meant to do that. Anyway, is faith a magic wand? Is that what it is? If we have enough of it, if we pray the right words, we can just abracadabra it and things will happen for us? Mountains will move. Just say the right words. Because sometimes we treat it like that. All our problems will be fixed if we just have enough of it, or wave it here, or push it there, or say the right things. What do we make of this strange statement that Jesus said? What on earth was he saying? Well, like some of the other statements, Jesus was using hyperbole or exaggeration to make a really important point. And that is this: that amazing things can happen even if we have just a little bit of faith. And our main point, which you already saw if you were taking note. Now it won't come. Well, what is going on? This magic wand doesn't work. That is not it. That is not our main point for today. I guarantee you. Should I try again? Everyone say abracadabra. No. It doesn't work. Yeah, that's our main point, is that faith does not... There it is. Surprising things happen even not in our timing. See, I'm just making this up now. Even a small amount of faith is powerful. That's the thing Jesus was trying to say. Even a small amount of faith is in a big God is powerful. It can lead to extraordinary things happening in our lives, in our families, in our church, in our community, in our world, for good. A little bit of faith has tremendous potential to bring change when it's properly cultivated and nourished, and it can see the seemingly impossible happen. Moving mountains in that culture was proverbial language, and it still is in ours, for overcoming improbable situations and difficulties. Moving mountains. Now, I'm not, everyone who knows me knows this, that I'm really not the name it and claim it sort of person. What's the other thing, Ben? How else do we say it? Bless it, what? Blab it and grab it. Yeah. That's not me. I'm not that sort of person. And these texts have been used over the years in lots of churches to abuse all sorts of situations and claim all sorts of things. But I do believe, actually, that Jesus wants us to have a bigger view of God, of what he wants to do and what he can do. And that he wants us to place the little bit of faith that we do have in him with greater confidence and more often than we do. And that God wants to show up in surprising ways in our lives, in our families, in our church, in our world, more often than we think he does. More often than we used to. Jesus made this weird statement on 3 different type of occasions in the Gospels. The first one is in Matthew 17, where I read. Jesus has been up a mountain with Peter, James and John, story of the Transfiguration. And while they're gone, the rest of the crew, the other 9, if you're good at maths, had tried to cast an evil spirit out of a young boy, and it didn't go so well. Matthew 17, verse 14. And then Jesus and the other three came down. It says, when they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. Lord, have mercy on my son. He has seizures and he's suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire, into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they couldn't heal him. You unbelieving and perverse generation, Jesus replied. How long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me. Jesus rebuked the demon and it came out of the boy, and he was healed at that moment. Jesus deals with the evil spirit. But then that's all good for the family. But the disciples came to Jesus in private and said, Lord, why couldn't we do that? It was kind of embarrassing, you know. We were there, you weren't here, so it was on us. And we tried and nothing happened. Jesus says it was because your faith is too small. Verse 20. He replied, because you have so little faith. Truly I tell you, if you had faith as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move from here, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. So it seems likely that the disciples were approaching this situation with a sense of entitlement. Like, hey, Jesus isn't here, but don't worry, we're here. We're his guys. Stand back, everyone. We've got this under control. Abracadabra. It seems like they didn't have a posture of dependence on God. Just an expectation that he would show up at their command, and that they could use him to make themselves the heroes of the story. That they were treating the authority he'd given them like a magic wand that they could wave. But the rabbit didn't come out of the hat. They looked a bit silly. Because that's not how faith works. It's not magic. It's dependence on God. It's based on a humble trust in him and a practical reliance on him in real situations. God isn't a genie in a bottle at our beck and call. He's the King and sovereign Lord of all. That's different. It's not a genie at our beck and call. So when Jesus said their faith was small, he wasn't actually talking about the quantity of it. He was actually talking about the quality. It was weak faith. It was impoverished. It wasn't true faith. He's saying if they had just even a little bit of true faith, that evil spirit would have come out of that boy. It would have been done for them. See, he'd already actually given them authority over things like this. Back in Matthew 10, it says Jesus called his 12 disciples to them. He was sending them out and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. He gave it to them. See, the context here in this story is about them stepping into the mission activity they'd been called to and for which they already had the authority. So this statement about moving mountains, Jesus is really trying to make the point, generally, to all of his followers, that amazing things can happen with even a small amount of true faith. But he's also saying specifically to his guys that a small amount of faith is powerful enough to accomplish the kingdom mission that God has called you to. Moving mountains in this passage seems to be more about stepping out in faith where God calls us and asking for and expecting to see mission miracles as God shows up and meets us in faith, and less about our personal blessings and victories. Second situation where Jesus said something like this is in Mark chapter 11. It's actually recorded in a few of the Gospels. So last week of Jesus' life, he's staying outside Jerusalem, a few k's away, a little town called Bethany. And he has to walk over the Mount of Olives into Jerusalem each day. And the day before had been the triumphal entry, if you know that story, Palm Sunday, big deal. And he's gone back to Bethany for the night, and now they're going back in the next morning. Mark 11, verse 12 says, the next day, as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Obviously didn't get a good breakfast back with Mary, Martha and Lazarus. No, I don't know. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves because it was not the season for figs. And he said to the tree, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. And the disciples heard him say it. Jesus curses a tree. Kind of a bit unfair. Poor little tree. But it wasn't just that he was hangry. I think that's how you say it, isn't it? Hungry, angry? Yeah. It was a highly symbolic act because in the Old Testament scripture, the fig tree was a representation of Israel itself. Sometimes it blossomed, sometimes it withered, sometimes it produced fruit, sometimes it didn't. So this is an object lesson. He's symbolically pronouncing the destruction and the withering of Israel, of the religious system and the leaders of the day who weren't producing the kind of fruit that God required of them. He's denouncing them. This is the only miracle of destruction in the Gospels. The only time he used his power for something negative to happen. Then Jesus goes into the temple courts. That's where he goes after he's passed this victory. And it says, on reaching Jerusalem, he entered the courts of the temple and began driving out those who were buying and selling there, making money and being greedy. He overturned the tables of the money changers, the benches of those selling doves, and wouldn't allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he did this, he taught them. It was an enacted teaching. It is written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you've made it a den of robbers. He denounces the greed and the corruption and the people who are just using the system to make money and use people. And he's symbolically foreshadowing the destruction of the temple that was to come and the system, which actually happened in AD 70 when the Romans came and smashed the place. It's never been rebuilt. Then they leave the city after that and come back the next day. Verse 20. In the morning, as they went along, they saw the fig tree with the roots. And Peter remembered and said, oh, look, Rabbi, the fig tree you've cursed is withered. Like, look, Jesus, as if Jesus was going to be surprised. And Jesus says this, you have faith in God, Jesus answered. Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, it's a bit different, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe you've received it, and it will be yours. Wow. Now it's interesting that Jesus didn't say, if any of you say to any old mountain. He said to this mountain. They were standing on the Mount of Olives overlooking Jerusalem and overlooking the Temple Mount, the two mountains that were in plain view. So it seems like he's actually using the physical mountains they're on and they could see, really important mountains for these people, as another object lesson to teach them that even large obstacles would have to give way and can be removed with even a little bit of faith. And to throw something into the sea was an act of destruction. The sea was a place of chaos and destruction in those days. That's how they thought about it. It was a bit of a mysterious place. And there's echoes of the story, if you know the story of coming out of Egypt, of Pharaoh and his riders, the horse and rider, thrown into the sea. They were destroyed by God's power. So it's like Jesus is saying that through faith, my followers will be able to pronounce judgment on strongholds and destroy them. They have the authority to do it because they represent the King, and they can destroy strongholds and knock down the forces of darkness as his kingdom building people. And by faith, my followers will have the authority to build and establish my new and living temple. Not a temple made of stone, but of living stones. Of transformed, spirit-filled followers. You'll be able to do that. I'm giving you authority to build my church, my kingdom. Step out in faith and do it. And by faith, you'll be able to see amazing things happen as you do that. And no obstacles, no mountains will be able to get in your way. Not persecution, not emperors, not hardship, not opposition. They'll all move. You'll be unstoppable. And by faith, you'll see this happen. And it happened. By faith, these simple disciples of Jesus built a new and living temple. Church, Simeon read the story of its birth. A community of holy people for the proper worship and fruitful prosperity of God's kingdom. And the truth is, God still shows up when his people step out in faith to build his kingdom and build his church. And strongholds can still be cast into the sea and destroyed. Mountains can still move. You actually realise, as I was thinking about this, it's 7 years since our church began to rebuild. 7 years in August 2000 and something. 16, well actually 15, but 16 really, when we stood in an old temple of a building and said we'd like it to be different. We want the church to be, building to be different, but we really want the church to be different. And a lot of you weren't here then, but that's what happened. And we, together, all of us, stepped out in faith, because in those days there were just a few families, and there was no youth group, And there was an occasional baptism if we were lucky. And the building was run down. There were no new people ever came to visit us. But we just believed with the little bit of faith that we have, it could be different. And God showed up. It's different. It changed people's lives. Because mountains move when these people have a little bit of faith and step out to build his church and his new living temple and his kingdom. The third situation Jesus said something like this is in Luke chapter 17. It's really in amongst some teaching that he's given that's found in a condensed version that's in some other Gospels. And he's just told them that if someone sins against you, you have to forgive them 70 times, 7 times, a lot of times. Endless forgiveness to someone who truly repents before you. In verse 5, the apostles said to the Lord, increase our faith. Maybe they needed more faith to forgive because it's a hard thing to do. Maybe that's why their question came out. Increase our faith, Lord. And Jesus says, if you have faith, the smallest as the mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree this time. Maybe there was a mulberry tree just right there, but they grew about 10 metres tall and big and deep roots, thick roots. Be uprooted and planted into the sea, and it will obey you. Tree obey you. It's a great request. Increase our faith. Isn't it? But Jesus wasn't really interested in increasing their faith, actually. Jesus said you don't actually need more faith. You need to use the faith you have. A little bit. Even a small amount of faith is more powerful than you realise. You see, Jesus is more concerned that faith is present in our lives than he is about the size of it. Because he can work with even just a little bit of real faith. And he's more concerned that faith is actually used. Used. That it's put into practice, acted upon. Because that's when it's powerful. Sometimes we say, I don't have enough faith to do that. I don't have enough faith to do what I sense he's calling me to do. I just don't have enough faith. But faith is kind of like, as Steve was talking about the gym, it's kind of like a dumbbell or weights or whatever. You don't wait till you have big muscles before you lift the things. You lift the things to get big muscles and strength, don't you? You don't say, you don't say, I don't have enough strength to lift. I haven't had enough, so I'll just look. Your muscles grow by using it. Big and strong. Actually, it's not very heavy, that one. I didn't want to embarrass myself. But you know what I mean? You don't say, well, I don't have enough muscle, so I can't lift it. No, you lift it to get muscle. Okay? And it's okay if you start small, if you really are quite weak.
That's Joe's way.
No. You can, because it's only a little bit of faith is all you need to get started. But it doesn't do you any good if it's just sitting there. It doesn't do you any good. You have to pick it up and use it and lift it. And Jesus is saying, don't worry about increasing your faith. Just use what you have and get started and it will grow. And sometimes, if you do just start with that little bit, doesn't feel like much. But you get to the point you go, that's easy. And the next thing comes, I could do that. But it's because you did that one that you can do this one. And sometimes when you've done that, then. Right, Joe, get up here. Come on, quick. If you want church to finish, you need to come up. Come on, quick. That's actually good. A few curls, please. It was 18 yesterday. 18. A few curls. Yeah. Oh, there. Why are you stopping? Keep going. A few more. No, it's two. Yeah, I can do it. How many can you do? Come on. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, good man. See, when you start small, it's surprising what you can do when you use just what you have. And actually, I feel like it's hard to lift that. And I actually feel like, Joe, Aaron, and lots of people in this church, lots of young people, you go through things and you're actually really strong, both of you guys. You've been through things that people don't know, and sometimes you do share it, but people don't know what you've been through, and your actually faith is strong. And I know, Joe, it's your birthday, so I'm indulging. Your faith is strong, mate. It's resilient and it's tough and it's strong, and I know that, and it is. And I know you hate me talking about you, so. But yours is too, Aaron, and people saw that today, so no more girly weights. All right, I'm just sorry, that's not offensive. Because I'm sorry. My point is, you have to use it, okay? Use a little bit of faith that you have, and you can be stronger, and you can do amazing things. Start small. Use the faith we have. That's how it grows. Even a small amount of faith in a big God is powerful. I'm going to give up. Can you just move that, Eve, please? There we go. Move mountains. So what do we do with all that? Well, I think that Jesus wants us to use the little bit of faith we have. I'm going to try again. And pray bold prayers. Pray bold prayers. Big, bold, God-sized kingdom prayers, not selfish ones. For good in our lives, in our family, in our church, and in our world. You see, I think what happens in life is that we get a bit disappointed because we do some things and it doesn't seem to work out. And life knocks the stuffing out of us and we get disappointed and hurt and things don't work and prayers don't seem to get answers and we settle for things as they are and we stop praying big, bold prayers. But we have to remember that God's agenda is often different to ours. And there's an element of mystery to the ways of God. Paul had this thing, whatever it was, that was really troubling him in life. And he prayed to God. Paul, the great apostle, prayed, Lord, take it away. Lord, take it away. Lord, take it away. The Lord didn't take it away. I'm sure Paul had faith. But he got a message from God that says, my grace is sufficient, it's enough for you. You don't understand. Faith isn't a formula. Hate it when churches use it as a formula. God's not a slot machine. This might surprise you. I've been listening to some hip-hop. Someone put me onto this dude. Anyone know who that is? NF. Who calls himself NF? I don't know what his name is, real name. Maybe it's Nigel Fred. I don't know what it is. I don't know. But I actually quite like his music, and he's I think he's Christian. I mean, he seems to be Christian. I don't know him personally. But he's got millions of followers. Right. There's this song called Oh Lord. And it spoke to me recently because it says, sometimes I look up in the sky and wonder, I could try and rap, I can almost rap. No. No, I do lots of things, I'm not doing that. It might just naturally sort of happen and sound really bad. Sometimes I look up in the sky and wonder, do you see us down here, oh Lord? Do you see us down here? It's easy to blame God, but hard to fix things. We look up in the sky and say, why ain't you listening? You have to say ain't if you're a rapper. Everyone asleep in the pews, blaming God for our problems like he's sleeping on you. We turn our backs on him. It sounds a bit like a rap, doesn't it? We turn our backs on him. What do you expect him to do? It's hard to answer prayers when nobody's praying to you. And that's the bit that really struck me. Blame God. My life sucks. And maybe God's saying, well, it's hard to answer prayers when no one's praying to you. And I know we do sometimes. It doesn't work out how we think. There's a lot of times we just don't. We've given up on it. Maybe think of that verse in James. You do not have because you do not ask. So I've personally been inspired by this one. I've been putting this one off because it's like, what do you do with that? Nothing will be impossible for you. Mountains will move. It's a weird statement. I've been inspired to pray bold prayers again. And it's kind of exciting. Just to pray them and leave them with God. Just use my little bit of faith and see what happens. And what if we became people, families, church, prayed bold prayers, took our little bit of faith and prayed bold prayers? What might God do? Because it's more about the size of our God than the size of our faith. And it struck me too that it's actually this main point, that even a little bit of faith is powerful, is true for, that's the story of salvation. Just that even a little bit of faith in God can save us. We don't have to understand everything about the Christian faith or not have any doubts. Even a little bit of faith to take that first step towards Jesus is powerful. It can change our life. It can change our life. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for this crazy, weird thing that you said. And Lord, I pray that we'd be people who pray bold prayers. Take that little bit of faith that we have and just believe in you again. Yeah, Lord, you said to your disciples, you don't need to increase your faith, you just need to use what you have. And maybe there's something bold you might like to ask God. Not selfish thing, it can be for you, something for your good or for the good of your family or the church or our world. I'm just going to give you quite a moment just to pray a bold prayer if there's one that's on your heart and you've given up on. Maybe it's something personal, maybe it's some mission, kingdom-shaped thing. And Lord, I want to pray a bold prayer that our church would grow. Not more people necessarily, but we would all, me too, be deeper. Have that, you put that little bit of faith, strengthen our faith by using our faith. That we would not be half-hearted and indifferent people, but we'd be always Jesus people. In our weakness, that you'd be strong. In our little bit of faith, that you'd be big. And Lord, we would see transformed life after transformed life here. See a generation of young people who grow up and take Jesus seriously, actually center their lives on him. And a generation of old people who live at that same life out till the very end. I pray for the families in our church. Hold them together, I pray. By Spirit and in love. I pray for people who need a touch of your healing, that you would touch them and heal them. And I pray for people who need to take a step of salvation and come to you and find life, that you would open their heart and they would come to you. If that's you can come to him now and say, Jesus, I come to you. I give up, I surrender, I come. Lord, we thank you for your love for us. You are a great and mighty God. I give you praise in your name. Amen.